Let me remind you of one thing, and we learned this in our 33 divine gifts, that what we learned is that you are the gift from God to Christ. You, believers, you are a gift from God to Christ, because we see in John chapter 17, he says over and over again, those that you gave me. You're a gift to God. You're a gift from God to Christ, but you're also the gift of Christ back to God himself. If that's the case, do you see the need for us to be clean and holy? Welcome to the doctrine of rewards. Welcome to the judgment seat. The whole idea behind this is when you're going to enter into the kingdom, he's going to deal with every single thing. Now, that may sound daunting, but remember, as a loving father, he's dealing with every single thing for your best so that you can come into the kingdom washed clean, ready to go, fully sin-free in the kingdom. So there is a huge part of this, and I'll just put it this way. God as a loving father is looking at you and he's cheering you on to do the good works here, because he knows the result of those good works is he's going to reward you. And wouldn't you as a parent, when you look at your kids, don't you want them to do everything they can to be the best they can possibly be, because you know what quality of life that brings? He wants your best quality of life here, and even more so, the best quality of your life in eternity. And that's, now you're beginning to see where the doctrine of rewards is going to come in. So what we get today, we're going to look at the results of judgment. There's good and there's bad. And once we get beyond this, we're going to start talking about the rewards in specific and living a life here that leads to those rewards and the right context and the right motivation for them and all of that that enters into it. So as we start this morning, yeah. Megan, did the recording start? That's a great question. I didn't hear her sweet little voice this morning. Would you just check and make sure? That's a great question. I didn't hear recording. I'm sure she did. Yeah. Megan's always on it. That's good. That's good. Okay, so we looked at some of the foundational things about this doctrine last week, but I want to remind you of two things. For believers, there are two judgments. Just so you're aware, there are two judgments. One is what's called the judicial judgment. That is the legal judgment of you coming into the kingdom. That was taken care of at the cross. Christ did that work for you and for me, that by simple trust and faith in Jesus, that gets applied to my life, and I am in the kingdom, secured, safe, doesn't have to be done again. That's the judicial judgment, the legal judgment that God says there has to be a payment for this. Jesus did it on your behalf because he loves you. And once we trust in him, that judgment no longer is on us. The wrath of God is not on us, and we are in the kingdom, safe and secure. Now, the rest of this deals with the judgment or the evaluation of our lives here on earth. And as Dr. Anderson loves to say, we talk about what we will save here for all of eternity. It's got a great little book called Saving the Saved. It means, as a saved believer in Jesus Christ, what of my life will be saved here that will be rewarded for all of eternity? And that's what the doctrine of rewards is about. We do spend some time specifically on the negative results, but we spend time on that so you can see how serious God is about you living a life for him, because he wants to reward you for eternity. There's the purpose. The purpose is not, I'm coming to get you. No, the purpose is, I want to reward you. So please live a life for me, live a life close to Jesus, live a life the way we talk about it, so that I can then take you and reward you for all eternity. See the perspective? So I'll say it again. We come to the judgment seat, to the Bema. We should not come, what's he going to do to me? Although there's some, we're going to talk about it today, there's some issues that we're going to have to deal with in the moment. Issues like weeping and gnashing of teeth, issues like regret, issues like being ashamed. But once we get through the judgment, guess what? Where are you for eternity? You're face to face with Jesus. You're in the kingdom. You get to experience all of the wonder of that. And he wants your experience in eternity to be the best it can possibly be, which is why he says, live the life now. Make sense? Okay, close your books. We're done. No. So let's talk about this. This is really an evaluation of our lives after we trust Christ. So this is the evaluation of our lives while we're here, evaluating them for what's going to remain, what's going to endure, and what's going to burn up going into the kingdom. And we'll talk about those after the fact too. So there is a positive result of judgment. Can everybody say yay? Yay. Something positive. Actually, it's all positive. So what these rewards are, and the positive side of the judgment is this. It is an evaluation because he's looking for every good thing he can pull out of what you've done on this earth. He's looking for the good. He's wanting to burn up the bad, but he's looking for the good. So he is a loving father looking for the best. So we want to make sure that we have that perspective coming into this. Now, there are conditions for receiving positive results. Faithful service. Are you faithful to serve him? Are you serving him at all? Are you continuing to serve him? Are you faithful in your service? He rewards those who serve him faithfully. And by the way, when we get into the actual rewards and we get into the crowns and all the good stuff, you're going to see specifics for how you live life today that matter because he's going to reward them for all eternity. But faithful service is a big one. Remember, when Christ returns, who's he looking for? Those of faith. He's looking for the faithful, those who have retained the faith, those who have kept the faith. And let's be really honest, this day and age, it's a little tough to keep the faith. But he's looking for those who remain faithful and serve him out of that faithfulness. We're going to get into some really interesting passages here. Let me talk about it from this standpoint. Dr. Anderson's coming out with a little 35, 40-page booklet on rewards. But this is, if you're really into the academics of this, get this little booklet. It's coming out in about a month. What he's going to talk about is from the Old Testament to the New Testament, there were two different grants, two different covenants. And this is how the world was decided. This is how things went in the world. There was one thing called the Lord-servant covenant, a covenant between the Lord, and this was the master, and the servant. And it was a reward for faithful service. You got rewarded, you got promoted, you got time off, you got all sorts of things that you were rewarded for. And in some cases, the master, if the servant was really good, the servant would be given land. He would be given property. He might even be freed. Go to the book of Philemon and you'll see some of this play out in that little book. There's also what's called the reward covenant. One of these deals specifically with past obedience. So because you have been obedient, I'm going to reward you here. Another one deals with future obedience. So for instance, Israel, they come into the land, and if they are obedient in the land, he will reward them by keeping them in the land. And we all know Israel was not obedient. And so what did he do? He removed them from the land, but he always made sure that that land was still there for them. So there are two different covenants at work, and they work all through Old Testament and all through the New Testament. Let's look, for instance, at Jesus, a perfect example of this. For his faithful service to the Father on this earth, he is given the world. There's his reward. Everything that's created now comes under his authority, based on his faithfulness to live up to what the Father had commanded. So Jesus even falls in with this. In fact, the book of Hebrews is all about that, the faithfulness of Jesus in actuality, us becoming sons and daughters of the King. So these rewards, they're everywhere. And when you start to really see them, what you see over and over and over and over and over again is that there is a reward constantly for faithful service now to the king, to the master. And it begs the question of us, am I a faithful servant? And I think every one of us could probably say, sometimes, maybe not always. Guess what? But not always, you're going to burn up. But sometimes he's looking for that so he can extract that and reward you for it. So again, there's a seriousness to why God wants this, but the seriousness to why God wants this is because Christ died for you so that you could live like him and be rewarded for all eternity. This is what a loving father does. So let's look at the passage. This is Matthew 25. We're going to get into some really interesting passages in this section. We know what this passage is about, so let me just do a quick overview. He says, the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. So the kingdom of heaven is like, whenever you see that passage, what Jesus is doing here is he was describing in this passage, this is actually, he's talking to the disciples, and he's describing what the kingdom of heaven is like. It's like a man traveling to a far off country who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. Who's the man traveling to a far off country? Jesus traveling here. And he's calling his, who? Servants, his disciples. He's calling his servants to him. And what's he delivering to them? His goods, his teaching, all the things that he has done, he's delivering them to them. To one, he gave 5 talents. To another, he gave 2, to another 1, each according to his own ability. Notice that, each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. So Christ now leaves. He leaves us with the Holy Spirit. Each one of us has been given talents, experiences. We've talked all about this in the past. We've been given all of those great things to live a life here to put him on display, to live a life here like Christ. So he's given us everything we need to do that. Every spiritual blessing in the heavens you have. So the one who received the 5 talents went and traded with him and made another 5 talents. So what did he do with his talents? Multiplied them. And how did he multiply them? Invested them. He went and did something with them that actually expanded those talents. The second one did the same thing. He gained 2 more. But he who had received 1, isn't it interesting? The one who received 1 is the one who was only given 1 because of his ability. He went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came to settle the accounts. Let me just put a backdrop here. We looked at 33 divine gifts all through last year, where God has given us to take advantage of to live the life for him here. You have 2 options. You can use them along with your gifts and your talents and your experiences and your spiritual gifts. You can use them for his glory and his good and your good, or you can bury them. If you bury them, we're going to talk about that. If you use them and invest them, guess what you get? More. You get rewarded. It makes your life here more full. You get more of the eternal life here now, as well as what you're going to get in eternity. There's a double benefit for you to take the things you have been given and invest them in kingdom work. Invest them in the work that God has put in front of you. Does that make sense? And guess what? He wants you to do that. He wants you to invest them because he knows the outcome, both here and there. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I've gained 5 more. He said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you what? Ruler. Ruler. Underline that word. Highlight that word. Over many things, enter into the joy. Don't you just want him to say to you, well done, I'm going to make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Same thing happens to the other servant. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. Remember what we talked about. A condition for a positive result is a faithful servant. Faithful to do what you should be doing as the Holy Spirit calls you with what you've been blessed with. Make you rule over many things and enter the joy of your Lord. So, with the talents and the resources you've been given, the question we ask is, what are you doing with them? What am I doing with them? Am I doing whatever needs to be done with them to expand his kingdom, to make him known, to do the kind, good works? Am I encouraging one another, stirring each other up to love and good deeds? We could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on, especially if you want to just dive into all the one another passages of the New Testament. Are you loving one another, praying for one another, bearing each other's? These are all things that are good works that can be rewarded here and in eternity. Are we going to be a faithful servant? First condition. Make sense? Questions? Thoughts?
So one quick question on the role of a ruler.
Yeah, we're going to come to that.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that it's all easy. It's more work, right?
No, what it really means is ultimately in the kingdom, those who do this are going to be given rulership. And we know this from the disciples. They're going to rule over certain areas, but there's a status level to the kingdom. Those who are really faithful are going to be given more responsibility. Those who are less faithful are going to be given less responsibility. That's what he's dealing with here. You're going to be ruling over a certain number of things based on your faithfulness. It's one of the rewards. We will talk about that when we get to the really good stuff. So that, he gives us that, and ultimately, what does that lead to? Did you notice the last little bit? Enter into the joy. What do you want in eternity? Matters what you do now. So we also look at the fact that enduring work receives a reward. Look at Luke 8. Therefore, take heed how you hear, for whoever has, to him more will be given in the future. This is a future statement to disciples that if you do the work here with what you've got, more will be given to you there. Whoever does not have what he has will be taken away from him. There's work that will be rewarded. There's work here that will endure. And that's the work we need to be looking for. What is the work that will endure? Remember that old saying, only one life which will soon be past, only what's done for Christ will last. Am I doing the work that will endure? Look, 1 Corinthians 3. This is kind of the foundation and the basis for this. For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, and straw, lots of different materials, lots of different things to build on the foundation of Christ, each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire. So just get this image in your head when we come to the Bema, to the judgment seat. The works are going to all be laid out. And what will be revealed by fire is what's going to endure and what's not. And you know, really one of the fun things is we learn a little bit about what will endure, but there's a whole lot of this that is just how we act here. If we're loving on each other, guess what? You're rewarded for that. If we're sharing Christ with others, you're rewarded for that. If we're doing kind works, you're rewarded for that. And those things don't burn up. Those things get refined. Yes, Chris.
I'm just going back to the Matthew statement of the talents.
Mhm.
Those are given from God.
Mhm.
It's not our abilities, as I think of it. It is talents that once we become a believer, he gives us maybe across the board, but there are others.
Yeah, and look, that's a great question. But Chris, let me give you maybe a little bit different scenario here. I'm just going to use me as the example, not that I'm putting me up here, but let me just use me as the example. Maybe it'll make a little more sense. When I became a believer, I was 14 years old, became a believer, went to my brother who shared the gospel with me, loved the fact that he did that. And I went to him 6 months later and said, I didn't think it took. I've shared this story before. He said, well, let's check those things that you wanted you wanted changed in your life. And it was obvious that those things had happened. Well, during the course of my life, God has moved me in very different experiences. A lot of those experiences he's now put to use in multiple different ways. There have been experiences where my sales background really came into existence. There's experiences where my Bible study and my seminary experience has done it, my church experience has done it, my parachurch experience. He's used every single one of those because what he's moved me to is now we're going to refine this. Now we're going to refine this. So yes, there are spiritual gifts, but he had, at least in my life, he's moved me so that more of those spiritual gifts can be refined and moved and shifted and changed and brought to the surface and reduced. He's taken everything. And out of taking everything, he's now said, I'm putting all of that to use. Question is, am I going to say yes? Or am I going to look at him and say, I'm going to hide those? Does that make sense? So yes, it's the talents, which is the spiritual gifts, but don't forget, he also created you. And in creating you, he gave you your abilities. He's giving you your experiences. He's giving you the resources. He's giving you all of that. And he's basically saying, all of it's mine. So put it to my use rather than for your own personal gain. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, Jane.
When I lived in Saudi Arabia, Aramco would let us have an oasis day. We could bring anyone from anywhere in the world. So Bill and Vonette Bright came one time. And she spoke in a Bible study that was going on in my home. And she put it, because it says each according to his own ability. She put it like a circus. She said, some women are able to handle 10 rings. Some can handle 3. Some can handle 1, but you don't compare and say, I'm not adequate. I don't handle 10. Whatever you can handle, do your best at that.
Yeah.
And work according to your ability.
Yes, correct. I was going to go down a rabbit trail, but I'll hold that rabbit trail for a different time. Great point. And the whole point of this is I don't compare myself to somebody else because somebody else has different experiences, different abilities, different spiritual gifts. And by the way, it's one of the things Paul fights in the Corinthian church. Stop comparing yourself with and thinking this is a better gift, this is a better gift, this is a better gift. And matter of fact, what he says is ultimately the gift of mercy and administration for the church. 2 most important gifts out there. Well, guess what are the 2 gifts that nobody really puts a whole lot of stake in? Mercy and administration. And yet the church thrives on mercy and administration. Everybody wants to be the prophet, or everybody wants to do this or this. And he's saying, no, if the church is going to survive, mercy and administration are the 2 you ought to be pursuing. I mean, just like Jesus, he turns everything over, turns it on its ear. Okay, 1 Corinthians 3:15. Again, no other foundation is laid, which is Christ Jesus. If anyone builds on this foundation with either gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or straw, that's where, based on that, it's going to get burned. And then the highlighted part, if anyone's work which he has built on it endures, he'll receive the reward. Okay, so notice that everything we do, think, say, all that comes in and gets burned. Some endures, some doesn't. And what I'd love to be able to say is on this basis, you can tell quickly what's going to endure and what's not. And we do know some of that. Selfishness, it ain't going to last. It's going to get burned up. But there are certain things that I guarantee we have done that we have no idea that it's going to endure. And probably because we did it without really going, God, I'm going to do this so that it'll endure. The minute my pride gets into it, guess where it goes? Burning up. But the ultimate to this is he's the judge. And as we saw last week, is he a righteous judge? Is he a loving judge? Is he a good judge? Does he want my best? So what he's going to do with those things is he's going to burn some of them up. He's even going to take some of our bad stuff and burn it down to the point that if there was a nugget of good in it, he's bringing that out too. He wants you to be rewarded for every single thing he can. And by the way, he knows it all. You're not hiding, and we're going to find that here. Nothing, nothing's going to remain hidden. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that they invested their talents.
Yes.
And so when you think of investments, you don't just take a wad of money and invest it and the next day you're rich. Like it's over the course of a lifetime. And so you might have lost money along the way. You might have made mistakes and learned from them and then reinvested it in a better way and so on and so forth.
Great point. Let me add one thing to that. When's he coming back? So if I don't know when he's coming back, what does that mean I should be doing right now? Living 100% for him, because since I don't know, and yes, I agree with you. You think about it as a long-term gain. I'm going to invest this because it's a long-term situation, but I live each day like he's coming back this afternoon. Make sense? And there's a reason for that, because one day we're all coming before the Bema. And when we do, he's going to take the good stuff and the bad stuff, burn it up, and he will determine what endures. But we know, and we're going to study a lot of this, we know the things that do endure. The good works that endure. Okay? So he emphasizes that the fire will test the quality of the works. Those works endure. Those works done with sincerity. Those works done in alignment with Christ. Do we know a lot of what Christ wants us to do? Yeah, we do. If we go do those are enduring works. So enduring works receive praise. We talked about this last week. This is a really good one. Judge nothing before the time until the Lord comes, who will bring both to light the hidden things of darkness and reveal the counsels of the heart. Then each one's praise will come from God. Whatever endures, guess what he's going to say to you? Well done. Well done. And I'll say it again. I think one of the beauties that's going to happen, this is the Mark Ray paraphrase of this, but I think what he's also going to do is he's going to say, well done, good and faithful servant. Now let me show you what I did with what you did. And I think what's going to open up for us, once this stuff is burned up and we're beyond that, I think what's going to open up for us is this magnificent thing that he says, you didn't think this was important? Let me show you what I did with it. You thought this was really important? See that ash right there? It's gone. It's burned up. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
So just understanding where this comes from and what's there, ultimately, and that praise, I think that's entering into the joy of the Lord. We just got this magnificent thing we're getting ready to experience. And I don't want us to walk into this thing going, what's he going to do?
Mark,
So
I have
there's
a quick
confidence.
question
Yes.
about the,
Yeah.
you just referenced the ash there. And I've read this many times. Do you feel like the fire is spiritual or active? A burning fire, like a cylinder, smoke, fire, ash, or is it spiritual or is it physical?
Yes.
That's what I thought. I was like, why would I want to ask? It's a kind of an odd question. Are we going to be sitting around fire?
I get it.
Or are we
I
going
get
to
it.
be-
There are
Sorry.
there's so much scholarship on this, it's really hard to land that, but I think it's both physical and spiritual. I think there's a temple view of this thing, that this stuff gets burned like it did in the temple for the sacrifice. I think there's a part of this here, but I think it's also spiritual. But I think there's a reality to him taking our good works and refining them to the point that they become crowns, jewels, things that we will ultimately give him glory for in the end. So it's my best answer right now. Might have to do a little more study on
Thank
that.
you. That well done. Because if it's a fire, then I want to see the jewelry after,
Let me tell you, if that's it, he's not going to hold that back. He's going to let you see it. So confidence in faithful work, 1 John 2:28. Now, little children, abide in him, that when he appears, we may have confidence and not be ashamed before him at his coming. Another thing we're rewarded for is confidence in him because we have been faithful. And notice that little phrase there. This is one of John's favorite phrases, abide in him. If you make your home in him, so what that word abide means, make your home in him. If you do that, guess what you have the confidence to do? Come before the judgment, come before the Bema. When he appears, we have confidence and we're not ashamed. We're going to look at a passage here that Paul talks about where he says, I don't want to be ashamed of his coming. Now, remember who's talking here? Paul, who doesn't want to be ashamed of his coming. Why would he have any reason to be ashamed of his coming? Look at Romans 7. I get up in the morning and I say, I'm not going to do this. And I'm doing the very thing that I said I wasn't going to do. Wretched man that I am, who will save me from this? Only Jesus Christ. There are things that Paul did, they're going to burn up. Sorry, there are. But there's a whole lot more that Paul did that's going to burn into rewards. And if you look at him time and time again, he talks about, I'm living this way because this is the reward that comes with that. And if it's a motivator for Paul, good enough for me. Okay, let's look at boldness in the day of judgment. 1 John 4:17, love has been perfected among us that we may have boldness in the day of judgment. You understand what's being said here? The day of judgment, when I come before the Bema, how do I want to come before the Bema? Cowering or with boldness? If I want to come with boldness, how do I live now? It's a really simple formula. If I live it this way, this is how I get to come. Because who am I coming in front of? A loving Father who wants only my best. 2 John 7, and this is a really good one. For many deceivers have gone out into the world who do not confess Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. You see that? What's the definition of a deceiver here? It's in the passage.
Not to confess Jesus.
They do not confess Jesus is coming in the flesh. That's a deceiver. The definition of a deceiver here in this passage that John tells us is somebody who says Jesus Christ never came in the flesh. That's a deceiver and an antichrist. Now, this is not the antichrist. This is just somebody who is against Christ. Look to yourselves that we do not lose the things we worked for, that we may receive a full reward. Keep the faith. Stand your ground. Proclaim Christ as fully God, fully man. He is the Son of God. Proclaim what he has done. Stand firm in that faith, and you can receive a full reward. Understand, that's what he wants for us. So don't waver in that. As we live in the alignment, in line with God's love and truth, we gain confidence for the day of judgment, ensuring that our work is not in vain, that we receive a full reward. He wants you to get it all. But that depends on how you live here. Have I beat that horse to death? Do we kind of get that one? Okay. All right. So let's look at some negative results here. And understand that the negative results here are the possibility of loss. So when you come before the judgment, it's going to get burned up. That's the whole point here. It's going to get burned up. So we're going back to the parable. This is the parable of the wedding feast. This is okay. So the kingdom of heaven is like, here we go again, top of page 22. The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who arranged a marriage for his son and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding. And they were not willing to come. He sent out more servants saying, tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen, my fatted cattle, killed, the things are ready, come to the wedding. But they made light of it and went their ways. One to his own family, his own farm, another to a business. The rest seized his servants, treated them spitefully, and killed them. What does this sound like? God's sending his servants out. And by the way, this is a mirrored image of God sending the prophets out to tell us who the king is and make the invitation, because that's ultimately what the nation of Israel was to do. They were to tell people about who God was and invite them to come be part of it. Come to the wedding, they made light of it, they killed them. And so when the king heard about it, he was furious. He sent out his armies, destroyed those murderers, and burned up their city, which, by the way, is an ultimate judgment on those who don't believe. Then he said to his servants, the wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. There's a reason why they weren't worthy. They didn't receive the invitation. They didn't accept the invitation. Therefore, go into the highways, many as you find, invite to the wedding. So those servants went out into the highways, gathered them together, all who were found. There's a lot of scholarship in this. I'll just tell you, there's a lot of scholarship in this related to Israel and Jews and Gentiles. That the Jews were invited, they rejected it. The door was open for the Gentiles. And the wedding hall was filled with guests. Okay, so you got the picture. Now the wedding hall is filled with guests. These are the ones who have accepted the invitation. So these are believers. They've accepted the invitation. We got it? We're clear? But when the king came in to see the guests, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. He wasn't prepared for the wedding. And by the way, this is the wedding of the bride of Christ to Christ. Okay? So this is the feast we're dealing with. And when he came in, he sees this guy not in his wedding garment. In other words, this guy accepted the invitation, but did nothing to get himself prepared to come into the wedding. This is how seriously God takes this. And I make a reference back to this in just a minute. So he said to him, friend, that's an interesting phrase. Friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment? The man was speechless. King said to the servants, bind him hand and foot, take him away and cast him into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. Okay. All right. So he comes without a wedding garment on, which means he's not prepared for the wedding, which means he hasn't done what was necessary to be invited to the wedding. Right? Think of the wedding in this building that is lit up because all the light is there. Christ is there, all the light is there, everything's there. If you step outside that door, what do you step into? So what we're saying here is that without doing the work here, the good works that come that bring you into the feast, that bring you into that wedding, we're not talking about heaven and hell here. Nowhere in this passage do you see talking about heaven. And by the way, this is a passage directed specifically to the disciple. So his warning to the disciples is this: get prepared for the feast. Do what you need to do to have the wedding garment on, because you're already invited. Notice that this guy has been invited. He's in, but he's not coming into the feast. He's going to be put into outer darkness. Outer darkness is not hell. Just so you know, this is not an issue of salvation, because who's he talking to? Believers. He's talking to disciples. But he is saying there is the possibility that if you hide your talents, if you hide your gifts, if you don't do good works, if you don't prepare yourself for this, you may not be invited to the feast. Are you still in the kingdom? Yes. But the difference between where you're going to be and what's going on in the feast, you're going to stand outside, and weeping and gnashing of teeth, put this word in big terms, regret. I'm going to be standing, looking in the window at the feast, knowing that what I did on this earth did not prepare me, get me ready to come in, because I took everything Christ gave me and I did nothing with it. Does that make sense? Yeah. This is not, and by the way, Matthew uses this. Matthew's letter, his gospel is to the Jews. So this is a warning. But ultimately, it's a warning to us as believers. If you don't do the work today, you may not be coming to the feast. Maybe in the kingdom, but you may not be coming to the feast.
But that's a tough thing. How much is enough? How much good works?
And here's the answer. You do it. If you do the good works, he's going to reward them. And we have to trust he's a good and righteous judge and is going to do that. So we're going to look at a bunch of things that you can do and you have done that are going to result in good works, going to result in rewards. So I don't want you to walk away from this going, I may not get there. What I want you to do is to be motivated to live for Christ now, because this is what's waiting for you. Get entrance into the feast, the opportunity to be there. But remember, he did not come prepared. So can I prepare? Yeah, absolutely. Are you loving on people? Are you caring for others? Are you praying for others? Are you working at good works? All of those things will turn into things that will invite you into the feast. Now, notice he doesn't say that here. This is one of those passages that's just like the passage, he's going to come quickly, but we don't know when. So my answer to that is, I can't give that to you, because here's what we'll all do. Did I do it? Did I do it? Did I do it? And once I get to the bottom of my list, okay, I'm done. And he's going to go, oh, no, you're not. So it is that lifestyle of, can I draw closer to Christ? Can I get more closer to Christ? Yes. Can I do works? Yes. Can I do more good works? Yes. Can I love people? Yes. Can I love them more? Yes. It doesn't end. And so ultimately, this whole issue becomes, God's the righteous judge. I trust him to judge me fairly. And then whatever it is, remember, the other side of this is, this guy is still in the kingdom. So even though I'm not at the feast, there's a whole side of what I get a chance to do. But friends, the ultimate to this is this. I want to be at the feast. I want to do whatever it takes to live the life for Christ now, so that these rewards will be mine. And when we start looking at all the rewards, you're going to hear Paul say this over and over and over again. Make sense? A little bit? So
Dr.
some of this
Mark?
I'm not going to reveal today. Some of this we're going to talk about a little later. Yeah.
Question. Is
Yes.
the wedding feast symbolic of the reward ceremony, or is it an actual sit-down feast?
From what I understand, it's an actual sit-down feast for all those who have been rewarded.
It's a food for
That make
thought.
sense?
Ha, ha, ha. Okay.
Okay.
No, I think, and answer kind of to what you were asking. Think about all the stuff you've already done. I mean, we're not just starting to do good works now.
No.
Ever since we've been believing, we've done
Sure.
good work. So I
Absolutely.
don't think I don't think it's something just we're now going to start doing.
Well, and let's be honest. Every one of us is going to come before the Bema. We're going to have weeping and gnashing of
Sure we
teeth, because
are.
we're going to look at certain things in our life and say, oh,
You think that was important?
yeah. Or you mean if I had just walked over here and given this person a drink of water, or if I had just, and some of those are going to be things he brings to mind and just says, if you had just this. And so there are going to be those things we regret. We regret the opportunity to have taken advantage of what he put in front of us. Beyond that, friends, do the work, love each other, do what you need to do, so that when it comes time, he's going to look at you and say, well done. This does say, and I had a seminary professor who said this, don't think that everybody is going to hear well done. You want to talk about a motivator for me? I'll share this. When I played basketball in high school, I had an assistant coach, and we had a coach he was a tremendous man, became a believer while I was a senior in high school. We gave him a Bible that he carried until the day he died. But he was one of those guys that was a taskmaster. He pounded into us. And the assistant coach walked over to him one day and said, he said, let me tell you about Mark. If you just pat him on the back and say a kind word, he will do anything for you. He will play his heart out for you if you will just pat him on the back. Bless you. There's so much that Christ is trying to say to us about, let me just make sure you understand. This is what I did for you. And what I want you to do for somebody else, is love on them, encourage them, bless them, get to know them, be in life with them, invest yourself in them, because those are the things that will endure. And I want him to say to me, well done, good and faithful servant. This is Paul's life. I want to be able to do this because I want that reward. I want what that's going to bring about. Yeah.
I just was gonna say, when you go to a wedding, nobody's dressed the same. You're dressed appropriately, but you're not dressed like the next person or anybody else in the room. You're there representing yourself the best way that you can. And so you can't really compare yourself or say to yourself, well, how do I need to dress? What do I need to look like in order to do this?
Yeah.
And when I studied this parable in the past, I read a commentary that a lot of times in these weddings, the king would actually provide the clothing for the guests. And so you just have to do what the king asks you to do.
Yes. Plus, the other thing is, in not comparing, everybody who's at the feast, guess what they have on? They all have a white robe. So that you can't look at somebody else and say, ooh, they're dressed better than I am. Ooh, I wonder where they got those shoes.
You must follow me.
But if you've ever gone to a party and not been dressed correctly, it's
Yes.
really embarrassing.
Yes, absolutely. You kind of want to hide. Great point. Okay. So just to make sure we're really clear, in Matthew, weeping and gnashing of teeth, just again, it's regret. You gnash your teeth at the fact that if I had just, this might be different. And you're going to look back over your life and say, there's a whole lot of if I had just. So parable of the talents, we're going to get going. Okay. Again, Matthew 25. Now we get to the one who received the talent and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, gathered where you have not scattered. I'm at the bottom of page 22. And I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. I hid your talent in the ground. I did nothing with what you gave me. That's what he's saying. You gave me this, and I did nothing with it. The Lord answered and said to him, you wicked and lazy servant. Now notice, is he still a servant?
Yeah.
And that sounds like really harsh language. But I want to put this into perspective for you. What did Christ do for you? Sacrificed himself for you, gave his life for you, and now indwells you. Have you got 33 divine gifts that have been given to you to live this life? And what this servant did is he took all of that, he buried it, did nothing with it, lived a life. Really what it's saying is he lived a life only for himself. He didn't live a life for Christ. Can you describe him then as a wicked and lazy servant? Very common language for that time. You knew where I reap and where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming, I would have at least received back my own with some interest. So take what he's given, what he's had, and give it to somebody else. So what we're going to see is we're still in the kingdom. There's a wonderful promise there that we're still in the kingdom, but the responsibilities I could have in the kingdom are now being given to somebody else, because what I did on this earth was I took everything that Christ did for me and gave me, and I did nothing with. This is how serious God is about how you live life now. Sorry, I'm getting a little excited with this. Yeah. Yes.
Just thinking about this servant and his view of God.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And as you said about being motivated, our motivation, if we have received that, the love of Christ, of God the Father, and the sacrifice, then we want to imitate him as his child.
Yes.
So the wicked servant, he has a wrong view.
Absolutely.
Of God the Father.
Yes. Yes.
And that's our responsibility too as well.
Well, and here, let me just tell you, here's a weeping and gnashing of teeth. If he's a servant, he looks at the other 2 servants who are rewarded, and he's not. What do you think he's feeling right then? If only I would have given it to the bankers. If only I had done a little bit with it. But instead, he takes everything he's been given and buries it. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. Cast the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Again, this is not hell. Then lost his salvation, he's still a servant. But what he's going to experience in eternity is going to be less than what he could have because he buried the talents. That makes sense? Okay.
What's the-
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, again, if you're in the wedding feast and it's full of light and you step out the door because you've been told you cannot come into the feast, you're standing outside, that's considered the outer darkness. So I'm still in the kingdom, but I'm not in where all the light is.
So what will be the role of the person who is not at the feast? If he's in outer darkness, what is there for him?
Well, remember this, that we're just talking about the feast, which is a one-time event. You still have eternity. And what's the role? There's going to be stuff for them to do, but you're not going to have the status and the responsibility that you would have had you done something with the gifts and talents.
Could be like a big celebration. You've gone through the rewards and you're all in there. There's no reason for the outer darkness people to not celebrate.
Well, and once the feast is done, once it's there, you've got all of eternity that you're going to be a part of this, which is the other side of it, because that's the side that the penalty of sin has been taken away. So the judicial side of judgment, you're in because you trusted Christ. You're just not going to be rewarded. And the motivation is, what do you want eternal life to be? Do you want it to be something where you're going, or do you want it to be something where you're going, yeah, because I lived the life for Christ? So the other side of this thing is the motivator here, and I really want you to hear this, the motivator here is don't think about, I'm not going to get it. Think about, I'm living because he's going to reward me, because I'm going to the feast. Live a life so you will. Make sense? Because we all have a tendency, it's human nature. We have a tendency to go, oh, I'm not going to get in. Why do we think that? Look at that one parable. Did 2 of them make it in? Why? They took their talents and they did something with them. The one that didn't get in took the talents and did nothing with them. Has everyone here does something with the life that they have given them for Christ? Welcome to the feast. Now, I'm not God, and I'm not the one that's going to judge, but I'm here to tell you, he's going to take those works, he's going to put them under fire. What's remaining was good, what's not is gone, and welcome to the feast.
Kind of the add-on to what you just said there. It comes back to it and says, if you would just given it to the bankers.
Yep.
And got interest, it's not
Yep.
a whole lot,
Yeah, it's not a whole lot.
just
Yeah.
a little.
Here. Let me take what you've given me in here.
I think for me, I just think back to the phrase that says, Christ died for me, now go live for him.
Yeah, that's it.
Because if you're living for him, you are living.
Okay, so let me run through a couple of things here. Okay, so consequences as living as an unfaithful servant, right? We're still on the bad results. Your work's going to get burned up. And if you ever want to see this, go to Philippians 3. I was going to do that today, but we're not going to do that today. Philippians 3, Paul basically says, my pedigree was good. My performance was without measure. It was perfect. But all of that was nothing compared to following Christ. And that's, you want to put it in perspective, all my fleshly work is going to burn up. We'll leave that one. All my fleshly work is going to burn up, but I consider everything loss to the gain of knowing Jesus Christ. So you want to go make sure you're at the feast? Pursue Christ. So works are going to get burned up. We've seen that because they'll be revealed by fire. You're going to just get disqualified from receiving rewards. This is a really interesting one. Look at First Corinthians 9. I'm on page 24. And Paul uses this metaphor over and over and over and over again. That life is a race. Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? So run in such a way that you may receive the prize. He's not saying be first. He's saying run in such a way that you receive the prize. Everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown. We in an imperishable crown. We're going to receive a crown that does not fade away, because the athletes received a crown of a wreath of flowers. Therefore, I run thus, not with uncertainty. I fight not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. Disqualified from what? Receiving rewards. He wants to make sure that his life here qualifies him to receive rewards. We're just saying that this is one of the possibilities of living a life when you do not do anything with your gifts and talents and everything else that Christ has given you. You could be disqualified from receiving rewards. It's a reality. God will judge justly. His judgment is perfectly just. He's the one who's going to judge. And notice in Colossians 3, he says, "You serve the Lord Jesus Christ. He who does wrong will be repaid for what he has done, for there is no partiality." Here's a really good standard for you. You do wrong, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get burned up. You do right, guess what's going to happen? It's going to be refined and become a precious stone. So you want a good standard? Don't do wrong, do right. And who sets the standard of doing right? Okay. Shame and loss at the Bema. This one's a tough one. I'm going to run through it. Unfaithfulness, notice that unfaithfulness can result in shame and missed opportunities for believers when they stand before the judgment seat. 2 Timothy 2, if we died with him, we shall live with him. If we endure, we shall reign with him. If we deny him, he will also deny us. And that's denying us if I deny everything he has given me and I put it away, he will deny me the rewards. 2 John 2, now little children, abide in him, that when he appears, we may have confidence and not be ashamed. I mean, there's no way to get around some of this, that when we come before the judgment, there's going to be difficulty. But that's on the human side. On the God side, he wants to burn all that away, refine it down, and put us into the kingdom with every reward we can possibly have. He wants all of our works, the best he can pull out of our works, he wants to preserve those and make those endure. We have the risk of losing rewards. Again, 2 John 7, that we do not lose those things we worked for, that we may receive the full reward. John's whole point in this is, you've worked hard in loving one another. Don't now deny Christ and lose the full reward that could be yours. Don't stop doing the things you're doing. And there's a huge part of 2 John, give you the quick progression. The Gospel of John, written so that we know how to come into the kingdom. 1 John, beginning to warn us about false teachers. 2 John, a further warning. 3 John, even pointing out those in the church who are deceivers. And then you get to Revelation, also a book by John, Revelation 3:20. I stand at the door and knock. What Jesus is saying to the church is, you've taken me out of my own church, and I'm knocking, asking you to let me back in. The church that I established, let me back in. What are we doing to make sure that Christ is reigning in our church? So we have the risk of losing that and the full reward that comes with that. Page 26. The imminence of judgment. God's judgment is not a distant concept, but an imminent reality. And I'll say it again. When's Christ coming back? Is he coming back? but we don't know when. So what am I doing today so that when I come before the judgment, when I come before the Bema because Christ has returned, that I'm prepared? It's Doctrine of Rewards is a really simple, ultimately it's really simple. There's a lot of stuff we deal with, but it's ultimately really simple. Are you living life today that will give you the best life now and the best life in eternity? That's it. Make sense? Does this make you want to just charge out the door and go share Christ and go pray for somebody and go love on somebody and go be obedient to Christ? Behold, the judge is standing at the door, James 5. It's a good laundry list right here. Therefore, be patient until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until it receives the early and latter rain. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. That just means it's imminent. At some point in time, he's going to come. And he's closer today than he was yesterday. Here's a really good one. You want one that's just going to convict you? James 5, do not grumble against one another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Anybody grumbled against somebody else? Welcome to the burning of that. That's going away. Welcome to that. It's a condition of judgment. And remember, what was the command of Christ in the upper room? Love one another, lest you grumble against one. No, he doesn't say that, but love one another. Period. As I have loved you, love one another. Starts in the household of God. 1 Peter, for the time has come for judgment to begin at the house of God. This is where it is. Judgment comes from God. He's the judge. He's righteous. He's holy. He's just. He's fair. And we have no reason to fear other than the regret that comes with lost opportunity. And the rewards are coming quickly. Revelation 22:12. Behold, Christ says, I am coming quickly. That word actually means soon. So when I come, it's going to happen fast. It's going to happen soon. And my reward is with me to give to everyone according to his what? What's the reward for? What you do. So real quick, as we conclude, the word quickly again means when it happens, it's going to happen fast. It does not mean, gee, why is he not here yet? It means when it happens, it's going to occur quickly. It's going to happen fast. Second, he's the one that brings the rewards. And third, the reward is based on what you do, your work. So how do we deal with all this? The Bema, our works, will be the outward evidence of the reality of our walk with God. What we bring to the Bema is going to ultimately be, this is my laundry list of the things that I've done that now is in his hands to judge fairly and righteously and justly. Questions, thoughts, comments? Please come back next week. Next week, we start understanding the full benefit of the rewards, all the things that are attached to it. We're going to give a really good foundation now for the rewards. We kind of put aside all of the difficulties on both sides. Thoughts, questions, comments? It gets good from here on out. Yes.
Is there anything we can do about stuff that maybe he's bringing to our mind that we should have done, but we didn't? Can we
Yes.
go back and do something else
Yeah.
about it?
I'll give you a great one. You got a relationship that needs to be resolved, go resolve it. If you bring somebody to your mind that you need to say, I am sorry, please forgive me, go do it. Make that good. If there's a work that needs to be done that you haven't done, go do it. If you bring something to your mind, don't bury it. Go act on it. Yeah, so those are, you bet. Yes, Chris.
I was just thinking, what about our thought life? How is that?
We're gonna get into that,
Okay.
because what we're gonna find out is that he brings to light everything done in secret, including our thoughts and our motives. And the reason why that's good is I want nothing left when I come into the kingdom. I want nothing left of an old thought process, an old thought pattern, anything. I mean, it's why we're given a command, take every thought captive. And it's not easy to do. But the beautiful thing is when we get to the judgment, he's going to burn all those out. He's going to take them out of here. He's going to get rid of it. So we come in holy, fresh, clean into the kingdom. And then you won't have a sinful thought life. That it doesn't exist anymore. Make sense? Good question.
I think that's one of the aspects that you talk about the feast.
Yep.
And the gnashing of teeth for those who are in the outer darkness. What do they take for eternity in that? You know, we say we're not gonna have regrets, we're not gonna have, you know, not, all those things have been burned up. So what's the actual timing of all of that?
Yeah.
And
It's a great
is that
question.
regret there too?
It's a great, but there will be regret because I'm not in the feast.
But is it
But-
gone at that, after that?
But just remember, if sin is no longer present, I don't have a sinful thought anymore. I'm not judging anybody else. I'm not looking at him and saying, oh, gee, oh, why did he get in and I didn't? None of that exists anymore. And so in the kingdom where the total language now is love, guess what I'm doing? I'm not comparing myself to anybody else. What I understand is that they were judged fairly, as was I. And on the fairness of that judgment, I'm not gonna look at him anymore and say, God, that wasn't fair. No, I'm not gonna do that. And once that sin is gone, those kind of comparisons don't exist anymore. The hardest part about all this is we have no idea what it's gonna feel like to have the presence of sin gone completely. It's gonna be wonderful.
Yeah, right. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's a great question. There'll be plenty to do. Anything else? Okay, we're gonna get fun after this. It's gonna get really fun. Any other thoughts? Anybody online? Anything else?
Question.
Yes.
If for some reason we like can't make it to.
Oh, yeah, no, you can get the recording. We record it, so the recording is made available to you.
Okay.
You see that?
And even during.
See her back in the back? You can ask Megan, she'll get you set up. Okay, so, yes. Oh, we have a little card for Jane Baugh. It is your birthday, right? There you go.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, dear James. Happy birthday to you.